The Galactic Academy of Combat Sciences stood tall on the moon of Virex, a structure of steel, crystal, and anti-gravity architecture floating in silence above a gray cratered landscape. Within its towering halls, the best warriors from dozens of alien species gathered to learn strategy, honor, and survival. No human had ever stepped inside its gates, until now. He arrived without an escort, carrying no visible weapons, dressed not in armor but in simple military fatigues from Earth. His boots echoed on the polished floor, drawing the attention of every being in the lobby. Some turned away. Others whispered. A few stared directly at him with narrowed eyes, curious and skeptical. The human's name was Commander Kane, and every soldier in the galaxy who studied war had heard of him. Rumors of his past had traveled faster than light, stories of battles, won against impossible odds, of beasts slain by hand, of survival in toxic zones where no other species could last an hour. Inside the Academy's primary auditorium, the first-year cadets gathered for orientation. Tall insectoids from Grunthus clicked their mandibles in irritation. Reptilian warriors from Drykar hissed quietly. Even the telepathic clouds of Velax swirled with nervous energy. They had all expected a formal speech from the headmaster. Instead, a human walked onto the stage. Kane stood silently for a moment, surveying the crowd. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "I'm not here to impress you," he said flatly. "I'm here because the council insisted. Some of you don't like that. That's fine. You'll get used to being uncomfortable." A ripple of surprise passed through the room. The translator drones buzzed, struggling to carry the weight of his tone. One cadet, a young warrior from the cold world of Krador, stood and scoffed. "Earth is a death world," he said loudly. "Your kind should not survive, let alone teach combat." Kane turned to him with a calm expression. "Earth doesn't teach us how to survive. It forces us." The words fell heavily into the silence. The cadets looked to one another, uncertain whether they had been insulted or warned. The instructors at the back of the hall exchanged glances. This wasn't the approach they had expected. Moments later, the Academy's lead instructor, Professor Zurich, entered the auditorium. His long, scaled body glided smoothly across the floor. With 8 glowing eyes and a voice like grinding stone, Zurich addressed the human directly. "This is an elite institution," he said. "We require proof, not reputation. If you are to speak to our cadets, you will be tested." Kane gave a slight nod. "Then, test me." Without delay, the professor activated a holographic display. A combat scenario shimmered into existence. It was a zero-gravity battlefield. 6 armed drones, each programmed with varying tactics from different planetary war zones. The room dimmed. Kane floated into the center, weightless, with the eyes of hundreds of aliens watching. The simulation began. One drone shot toward him from the left. Kane twisted his body mid-air, grabbing its mechanical limb and using its momentum to fling it into another. He moved without hesitation, anticipating attacks that hadn't launched yet. Within minutes, all 6 drones were floating lifelessly, disabled and sparking. The lights returned to full brightness. The crowd stayed silent. Kane pushed off the wall and landed lightly on his feet. He walked back to the stage, brushing a burn mark off his sleeve. "Any questions?" The cadets didn't respond. Some stared in disbelief. Others now looked at him with new caution. Zurich didn't speak immediately. He hadn't expected the human to perform so well. Still, his pride forced him to act. "Strength alone does not make a warrior," he said. "Let's see how you handle pain." He led Kane and the cadets to the trial chamber, a dark room filled with devices meant to measure tolerance, willpower, and discipline. One machine stood, at the center, the pain gauntlet. "Place your arm inside," Zurich commanded. It stimulates every nerve in your body, without causing damage. Kane looked at the machine, then at the gathered audience. He placed his arm in without hesitation. The machine activated. Red lights blinked rapidly. Monitors displayed rising levels of neural stress. A Krator warrior had once lasted 2 minutes. Most species didn't cross the 1-minute mark. At 5 minutes, Kane hadn't moved. At 7, a bead of sweat formed on his brow, but he said nothing. At 10, Zurich shut off the machine. Kane removed his arm and looked at the professor. Earthquakes, lava pits, blood storms. You think that machine scares me? No one spoke. The silence in the room was deeper. Then space. For the first time, the Academy began to understand what a Deathworld human truly meant. Not just strength, not just skill, but something much harder to teach. The will to keep going when everything else says stop, and that was only day 1. The next morning, the Academy buzzed with energy. Word of the humans' quiet domination had already spread across every hall, training yard, and mess room. Cadets whispered in their native languages, glancing sideways at each other, their voices filled with curiosity and caution. A few still doubted him, but most now carried a different expression. Unease mixed with interest. Commander Kane didn't speak much as he entered the combat simulation wing. Unlike the day before, he was no longer a stranger. Now, he was the challenge. His presence shifted the atmosphere around him. When he stepped into a room, conversations halted. Even the usually confident instructors kept their tone careful around him. Professor Zurich was waiting again, his posture stiff and unreadable. Despite the previous day's events, he wasn't ready to back down. He believed that humans relied too much on physical endurance and raw survival, not on precision or intelligence. He had prepared a new trial, one that couldn't be passed with strength alone. The Maze of Logic, Zurich announced. A mental simulation filled with traps, riddles, and shifting paths, designed to test planning, focus, and quick thinking. Kane nodded once and stepped into the pod. The chamber closed, and the room fell silent except for the humming of the machine. A large screen activated, showing Kane's avatar navigating the virtual maze. The maze shifted constantly. Corridors moved, paths vanished. Hidden codes appeared for brief moments before disappearing again. Each section required a new way of thinking: mathematical sequences, spatial patterns, and alien logic systems. Most cadets struggled to complete, even 2 zones. Kane progressed through 7. In one segment, he paused, narrowed his eyes, and stepped backward instead of forward. A second later, the ceiling above collapsed where he had just stood. He had recognized a rhythm in the maze's movement and predicted the shift before it happened. In another area, strange alien symbols flashed on the walls. Kane crouched and began tracing the patterns with his finger. Within moments, a hidden panel opened, revealing the exit to the next level. It wasn't just memory. It wasn't guessing. He was reading the logic like a language. Zurich folded 2 arms across his chest, growing quiet as the human advanced. He had assumed the human's talent stopped at physical ability. This was something else. Adaptive intelligence, the kind that didn't follow rules, but rewrote them. Kane completed the entire simulation faster than any previous cadet. When he stepped out of the pod, the crowd of students waiting in the hallway didn't speak. They simply watched. Some looked nervous. A few looked inspired. Instead of celebrating, Kane walked over to a quiet corner and sat down, as if he had simply completed another daily task. He opened a small pouch and pulled out a protein bar. Calm, relaxed, and uninterested in the attention. A young alien named Tirana approached. She was small, bird-like, with bright eyes and feathers that changed color based on emotion. She hesitated before speaking. "Why are you really here?" she asked. Kane glanced up. "To teach," he said simply. "But you're already stronger than all of us. Smarter too. What's left to prove?" He looked at her for a moment before replying. "It's not about proving. It's about preparing." She tilted her head. "For what?" Kane didn't answer right away. He looked past her, through the window where the stars stretched endlessly across the dark. Then he said, "The galaxy's peaceful now. But peace is a thin wall. And Earth taught me never to trust thin walls." Tirana didn't understand the full meaning of his words, but the seriousness in his voice stayed with her. Later that day, Kane was invited to observe a multi-species sparring session. Cadets were paired randomly, each team a mix of styles, sizes, and strategies. Kane stood by quietly, watching their techniques, timing, and instincts. At one point, two cadets began arguing. One, a large creature from Golarath, shoved his smaller partner aside. "You're too weak. I don't need help." Kane stepped forward. "Fight me," he said to the larger cadet. The room froze. The Golarath cadet laughed, thinking it was a joke. But Kane wasn't smiling. They squared off in the circle. Kane didn't rush. He let the other charge first. The alien lunged, swinging a heavy fist. Kane ducked, pivoted, and swept the creature's leg in one clean move. The cadet crashed to the floor. Before the alien could recover, Kane had him pinned with one knee and an open palm at his throat, not hurting him, just showing complete control. "Strength without discipline is just noise," Kane said calmly. "And noise gets soldiers killed." He stood up and walked away, leaving the stunned cadet on the floor. The room stayed quiet for a long moment. Then training resumed, but with new focus, less ego, and more respect. That night, as lights dimmed across the academy, alien cadets lay awake, replaying the day in their minds. They came from different planets, raised under different suns, but they all shared the same thought. This human wasn't just dangerous, he was something else entirely, and none of them, not even Zurich, could guess what he would do next. As the sun rose over the horizon of Virex, casting soft blue light across the Academy's glass spires, the instructors gathered in the central council chamber. The atmosphere was tense. Professor Zurek stood at the front, his expression hard. Behind him, several screens showed replay footage of Kane's maze trial and combat sessions. Discipline, pain tolerance, mental adaptation. "He's passed them all," said Commander Weissel, a calm and precise insectoid from the planet Mirren. "The students look up to him now. Some even follow him." Zurek's voice was sharp. "This isn't admiration, it's fear. They fear what they don't understand." Another instructor, a serpent-like being named Kalos, slithered forward. "Maybe fear is useful. If the galaxy faces a threat we cannot yet see, we may need leaders like him." Zurek narrowed his many eyes. "Or he is the threat." While the Academy debated, Kane was already at work. On the lower training deck, he stood before a group of cadets, showing them a different kind of lesson. Instead of weapons or battle, formations, he taught survival basics. "This is how you build fire without technology," he explained, rubbing two stones together over dry bark. "This is how you filter water using only sand and cloth. In war, tech fails. Nature doesn't." The cadets watched closely. Some tried his methods, failing at first, then succeeding. These weren't typical drills. They were lessons built from a world where nature attacked without warning, where survival meant outsmarting the planet itself. Later that day, Zurich sent for Kane. They met in the observation room, a high chamber overlooking a vast artificial canyon. Below, a mechanical arena sat ready, its surface covered with shifting platforms, unstable ground, and hidden traps. This next trial isn't simulation, Zurich stated. It is real. And dangerous. Kane studied the arena. What's the test? A hunt, Zurich replied. We've released a creature from the outer sectors, a Dravok beast. 6 meters tall, strong, fast, impossible to tame. You will face it. Alone. Kane nodded once. When do I begin? Zurich motioned toward the entrance. Now. Inside the arena, the walls rose, and the floor shifted under Kane's boots. He moved silently, eyes scanning the terrain. He didn't carry any advanced weapon, just a curved survival blade and a coil of strong rope. A low growl echoed from the shadows. Then it came. The Dravok beast charged, its limbs pounding the ground, eyes glowing yellow. It roared, shaking the walls, its thick hide covered in sharp spines. The crowd watching from above gasped. Kane didn't run. He waited. At the last second, he dove to the side, rolling behind a boulder. The beast struck the stone, cracking it in half. Kane climbed the beast's back, driving his blade between the armored plates near its neck. The beast reared up, thrashing, but Kane wasn't trying to kill it. Instead, he jumped off and whistled. 3 short notes. The beast paused. Then, shockingly, it turned toward him and stopped moving. The crowd murmured in disbelief. Kane had read its behavior, found the rhythm of its breath, and used a signal, not to command, but to communicate. Zurich leaned forward, eyes wide. That's not possible, he whispered. Kane raised a hand. The beast lowered its head. Then he walked calmly back to the gate. When he exited the arena, a crowd of cadets stood waiting. They didn't cheer. They didn't speak. But their faces said everything: respect, wonder, caution. Tirana stepped forward, her feathers a soft silver gray. How did you know what to do? I watched it breathe, Kane said simply. It was scared too. The words surprised her. Scared? That thing? Everything bleeds. Everything fears pain. The difference is how it handles it. Meanwhile, news of Kane's performance reached beyond the Academy walls. Across star systems, military outposts and governments took notice. Reports were sent, messages exchanged. On Earth, the Defense Council watched from afar, silent and alert. Back on Virex, Kane returned to his quarters. The room was clean, quiet, but cold. No decorations, no personal items. He sat on the edge of the bed and looked at a small object in his palm. It was a ring, tarnished, plain, and worn. He held it for a moment, then placed it back in a box before lying down. Outside, Zurich stood watching the stars. He couldn't sleep. His mind spun with questions. Why did this human win every trial? How had one man trained on a chaotic world surpassed species bred for war? The professor clenched his claws. There's more to him, he muttered. No one becomes that dangerous without losing something. And he was right. Because Kane didn't come to teach. He came to prepare them. For something worse. Something no one in the galaxy was ready for. Yet. The Academy's evening sky turned a deep violet as stars blinked above the transparent ceiling of the eastern courtyard. Cadets from across the galaxy gathered in small groups, quietly discussing the day's events. Whispers of Kane's encounter with the Dravok beast echoed through every hallway. No one had ever calmed a wild creature from the outer sectors, let alone done it without advanced tools or tranquilizers. Despite the buzz, Kane kept his routine simple. He trained alone on the edge of the open field, moving through old combat drills without pause. Each motion was smooth, practiced, and efficient. He didn't strike with power. He moved with purpose. Every step followed a rhythm, like a song only he could hear. Tirana stood nearby, observing quietly. She wasn't the only one. More cadets had begun watching his routines, trying to understand what made him different. It wasn't just his victories, it was the way he carried himself. Confident, but never arrogant. Calm, yet alert. When he finished, Kane sat down under one of the light trees, tall plants with glowing roots that pulsed softly at night. Tirana walked over, clutching a small recording device. "Do you mind if I ask a question?" Kane nodded once. She sat beside him, her feathers shimmering pale green. "What is Earth really like?" He looked up at the stars for a long moment before speaking. "Unforgiving. Beautiful. Loud. It wants you to break, but if you don't, it teaches you to bend." Tirana tilted her head. "And your people? Are they all like you?" Kane let out a low breath. "No. Most are just people. But the ones who last, they become something else." She paused, then asked gently, "Were you always like this?" Kane's gaze grew distant. "No. I was a soldier, a brother, a son." Tirana waited. The silence stretched, but not uncomfortably. When he finally spoke again, his voice was quieter. "There was a flood," he said. "It hit our colony during the second cycle of storms. We lost power, communication, everything. My younger sister, Mara, she didn't make it. I tried to get to her. I was too late." The words sat heavy in the air. "I trained harder after that," Kane continued. "Not to be strong, to be fast. Fast enough that no one would die because I hesitated again." Tirana didn't respond. She understood more in that moment than in any lecture she had ever attended. Kane wasn't driven by pride or ambition. He was pushed forward by loss. The next morning, the Academy hosted a new event, Tactical War Games, a team-based exercise designed to test leadership and coordination. Each group was a mix of species, skills, and strengths. Kane was assigned to a squad with 4 cadets. A bulky crater brawler named Hex, a slim Murin scout called Leary, Tirana, and a nervous tech specialist from Jorel named Sim. The scenario was simple. Reach the beacon at the center of the field without being killed by opponents or traps. But the terrain was complex. False cliffs, hidden mines, and shifting barriers. Kane didn't issue commands. Instead, he listened. "What's everyone best at?" he asked. Hex pounded his chest. "Crushing things." Leary tapped her lenses. "Speed and recon." Sim spoke last. "I can disable systems, if I don't panic." Kane nodded. "Then, you're the key. We protect you. You find the safest path." Most leaders would have taken charge, given orders, controlled the map. Kane did the opposite. He gave each member a role and trusted them to do it. The result was smooth and quiet movement across the field. While other teams bickered or rushed, Kane's group advanced steadily. At one point, they encountered an enemy squad. Hex wanted to charge. Kane raised a hand. "No need." Leary circled around, found a loose panel in the wall, and Sim hacked the trap controlling the enemy's ground. When triggered, the platform collapsed, taking their opponents down with it. Second beacon came into view minutes later. Kane stood back as the others approached it. He didn't take the final step. He let Sim activate the marker. They won. When they returned to the starting point, Zurich stood watching with narrowed eyes. He had hoped Kane would dominate with force again. But this was something different. Leadership without ego. Later, during debriefing, Zurich addressed the class. "What made this team succeed?" Leary answered. "We weren't told what to do. We were trusted." Kane said nothing. He didn't need to. The lesson had already been learned. That evening, the Academy's records were updated. Kane's squad had set a new time record in the war games. But what truly surprised the instructors was the report submitted by his team. Each cadet noted that they had never felt more focused or prepared during any previous exercise. In his quiet room, Kane placed a new item beside his sister's ring. A small medal, awarded for tactical excellence. He didn't keep it for pride. He kept it as a reminder, because Earth didn't raise heroes, it forged survivors. Rain fell softly over the Academy's outer platform. The artificial weather system mimicked real planetary conditions to prepare. Cadets for all climates. It wasn't dangerous, just inconvenient. Cold, wet, and persistent. But Kane moved through it as if it weren't there. His footsteps steady on the slick metal floor. He had volunteered to oversee the night patrol exercise. A routine training meant to test alertness and teamwork in low-visibility conditions. Most instructors used drones to monitor from a dry command room. Kane, however, insisted on walking alongside the cadets. He said nothing about leadership. He simply appeared beside them, checking gear, scanning the distance, and listening to the silence. His presence changed things. Cadets who usually joked or grumbled grew focused. They adjusted their posture, checked their equipment twice, and moved with more care. Even those from warlike species found themselves mimicking his quiet discipline. Tirana, assigned to the second watch, spotted him, near the southern fence. She approached with her flashlight angled low. "You don't have to be out here," she said, her voice hushed. Kane glanced at her. "And miss the best part of training?" She tilted her head. "You enjoy standing in the rain?" "It reminds me of home." That answer stayed with her. Earth, it seemed, had taught him to value discomfort. Maybe it was the challenge, or maybe it was the clarity it offered. The next day, an emergency alarm shattered the Academy's usual calm. A distress signal pulsed from the outer perimeter. Security bots picked up motion, unidentified life forms breaching the east gate. The first report suggested it was a malfunction, perhaps a false alert. But Kane's instincts said otherwise. He moved quickly, assembling a response unit of senior cadets. Tirana, Hex, Leary, and Sim joined him without hesitation. None of them questioned his orders. He led them into the security tunnel, where walls shimmered red under alert lights. They reached the outer fence and found the truth. 5 intruders, cloaked, figures with jagged weapons and cybernetic implants, were cutting through a secondary gate. They weren't part of any simulation. They moved with coordination, their armor marked with the sigil of a rogue mercenary guild, the Obsidian Veil. Kane raised a hand, signaling his team to spread out. "No contact unless I move first," he said. The intruders stepped through the gate, unaware they were being watched. Kane launched first. In one fluid motion, he tackled the nearest attacker, disarming him before the others could react. A short fight broke out. Leary darted across the field, disabling sensors to contain the threat. Sim activated a field jammer to block outgoing signals. Hex charged, crashing into 2 enemies with brute force. Tirana stayed high, covering angles with a stun launcher. The entire clash lasted under 3 minutes. All 5 intruders were captured. Later, inside the debriefing room, Academy officials reviewed the footage. Every angle showed precise coordination, quick thinking, and strong teamwork. Without panic, without chaos. Zurich watched in silence. He had grown wary of Kane. But this was different. The cadets weren't just following the human. They were improving under him. Still, he couldn't let go of his doubts. He pulled Kane aside. "These invaders, they didn't appear randomly. Someone sent them." Kane nodded. "I thought the same." "Do you know who?" Zurich asked. Kane didn't answer directly. "Someone testing how far I'll go." Zurich narrowed his eyes. "Will you go too far?" Kane replied quietly. Only if they make me. Later that night, as cadets returned to normal routines, word of the attack spread. No one had been hurt. Nothing had been stolen. But something had changed. Kane was no longer just the strange visitor from Earth. He was now their defender. Their shield. In the dormitory hall, Sim approached Kane as he cleaned his blade. "I used to think humans were dangerous because of your planet," Sim said. Kane glanced up. "And now?" Sim shifted awkwardly. "Now I think your planet just taught you how to stay human, even when the world goes mad." Kane didn't smile, but a faint light touched his eyes. He gave a small nod and returned to his task. Elsewhere, deep within the Academy's hidden systems, an encrypted message was sent off-world. A shadowed figure read the report and tapped a clawed finger against the table. "He's ready," the message said, "but he doesn't know what's coming." Back at the Academy, Kane stood once more beneath the artificial rain, watching the lights reflect off the wet ground. His past had followed him to Virex, and his presence had already started to reshape the future. But he wasn't here to change cadets. He was preparing them for a war the galaxy refused to see coming. And when it arrived, it wouldn't care about bloodlines, history, or peace treaties. Only those who could survive chaos, like the humans from the Deathworld, would have a chance. Morning came with a new sky color. On Virex, each day began with a different hue. Today, it was a pale orange, like sand blown through soft light. The cadets lined up in formation on the central drill field. Rumors of the recent intruder attack still hung in the air, but the Academy pressed forward. Training never stopped. Kane stood to the side, arms crossed, watching closely. His eyes moved from group to group, quietly studying posture, timing, and reaction speed. He didn't interrupt. He didn't raise his voice. When he finally stepped forward, the crowd shifted without needing to be told. "Half of you move well," he said. "The other half move fast, but few of you move with purpose." The cadets waited, silent. "Speed helps," Kane continued, "but knowing why you move, that's what saves lives." He split the group into pairs and assigned a new challenge: disarm and evade. Each cadet had to disarm their partner without causing injury while avoiding a second attacker. It required precision, timing, and restraint. At first, most struggled. They rushed in, grabbed too fast or lost balance. Kane walked among them, correcting angles, adjusting grips, and showing alternative movements. His own demonstrations were quick, quiet, and sharp, too fast for the eye to follow. He didn't hurt anyone. He didn't need to. The point wasn't power. It was control. Tirana observed from the side. Her feathers glowed faint blue, showing deep focus. After watching Kane correct another student's stance, she stepped into the circle. "May I try something?" she asked. Kane nodded. She moved with soft feet and sharp eyes. Her body swayed, then struck with sudden speed, disarming her opponent before slipping behind the second attacker. She tapped their back lightly. Clean win. Kane gave a single nod. "You thought before you moved." Tirana's feathers shimmered silver with pride. Later that afternoon, the cadets returned to the mess hall. Normally, meals were loud and full of chatter, but today, the room was different. Something had shifted since the incident with the obsidian veil. Even the newer cadets felt it, a sense of unity, built around one figure. Kane ate alone as usual, sitting at the far end, but this time, a small group joined him. Tirana, Lyri, Hex, and Sim carried their trays over without asking. They didn't speak for a while. They just shared the space. Eventually, Sim broke the silence. "They said Earth has desserts made of glass. Is that true?" Kane looked up. "Yes. One was formed during an old war. The heat melted the ground. Leary leaned forward. And you walk across that? Kane nodded. With care. The conversation turned to other topics: planets, foods, old battles. But the tone stayed calm. No one treated Kane like a mystery now. They saw him as a guide, not a shadow. Later that day, Zurich summoned Kane to the council chamber. Inside, a tall alien with bronze armor and a bright white crest stood waiting. She was High Marshal Oraxa, commander of the Galactic Defense Front. Her presence meant only one thing: outside danger. Oraxa turned to Kane. You've drawn attention. From who? He asked. From those who fear Earth's example. Some believe you're here to prepare a human expansion effort. Kane's jaw tightened slightly. I'm here because peace is fragile. Oraxa paced. The Obsidian Veil didn't act alone. Someone gave them coordinates, passcodes, and escape routes. Zurich spoke then, his tone low. You think there's a traitor? There may be more than one, she said. We need someone the enemy won't expect. Someone they fear. Her gaze locked with Kane's. He didn't blink. Are you asking me to hunt them? He said. Oraxa paused. No. I'm asking you to train the ones who will. Kane looked toward the wide window, where cadets were still running drills in the distance. His voice was steady. Then we start tonight. By evening, a new order had been issued. An advanced team would be formed from the top cadets, those who had shown not only skill but resilience, flexibility, and clarity under pressure. They would learn more than standard tactics. They would study human methods, the kind used to survive extinction-level threats. The group included Tirana, Sim, Hex, Leary, and 6 others. The rest of the academy didn't know the purpose of the group. They only knew it was led by the human from Earth. In a quiet training room beneath the main hall, Kane greeted the new team. He didn't give a speech. He handed out thin books, manuals written in Earth Standard. Inside were chapters on movement, survival, misdirection, and psychological pressure. This isn't about war, Kane said. It's about what happens before war begins, how to see it, sense it, and stop it. One cadet raised a hand. And if we can't stop it? Kane's reply was soft. Then you survive it. And make sure others do too. The galaxy might not have asked for a Deathworlder to lead its future warriors, but it was getting one anyway. Night wrapped the academy in deep stillness. The sky above shimmered with distant stars, while soft lights lined the walkways between the buildings. In the lower courtyard, the selected cadets stood in a circle, their eyes fixed on the figure before them. Kane stood in silence for a long moment. Then he dropped a small black device in the center of the group. It opened, releasing a dim, holographic image of a shattered space station. Twisted metal floated in zero gravity. Fires flickered in the wreckage. Silent bodies drifted among the debris. This is what happens, Kane said, when leaders ignore warning signs. The cadets didn't speak. The image faded. The station belonged to a neutral medical alliance, Kane continued. No weapons, no soldiers, just doctors. The Obsidian Veil didn't attack for gain. They attacked to send a message. Leary stepped forward, her expression hard. Why now? Because Earth is watching, Kane answered, and someone doesn't want it to interfere. The group followed him into the old training dome, now reprogrammed for special drills. Inside, Kane had designed a new simulation. No bright colors or clear paths, just darkness, pressure, and sound. Whispers echoed through the hall. Alarms blared at random. Lights flickered without pattern. Today's lesson, Kane said, is confusion. Fear is loud. Survival is quiet. The cadets moved carefully. They stayed low, listened for signs, and communicated without words. Each mistake triggered a new obstacle. At one point, simulated fire filled a hallway. Sim froze, panic rising in his chest. Kane appeared behind him. Breathe. Think. Move. Sim nodded quickly and crawled through a side shaft. He made it out, coughing but steady. After 2 hours, the simulation ended. The team looked exhausted, but their eyes burned with focus. "You all passed," Kane said. "Not because you were perfect, but because you kept going." Later, the team gathered in the observation lounge, overlooking the vast plains beyond the academy walls. Tarana sat beside Kane, her feathers pale from exertion. "Do you ever stop training?" she asked softly. Kane looked at the stars. "Only when there's peace. Real peace. Not silence before another storm." Tarana rested her head against the chair. "Do you think we'll see that peace?" "Maybe," he said. "But not by waiting. We have to build it, piece by piece." That night, the Academy held its founders' ceremony, an annual event celebrating the day it was first formed. Students dressed in formal wear. Lights danced across the towers. Music played from alien instruments. But something different hung in the air. Kane, dressed in a plain black uniform, stood near the back. He didn't join the line of honored instructors. He didn't carry medals or symbols. Yet every head turned when he entered. One of the senior counselors, an aged being named Relac, approached him. "You've changed them," he said. "They changed themselves," Kane replied. "They just needed a reason." Relac nodded. "And when the war comes?" "They'll be ready." During the ceremony, Tarana was called forward and given the title of Strategic Cadet First Rank, a title rarely earned this early in training. Her eyes met Kane's from across the room. He didn't smile, but he dipped his head slightly. She understood what it meant. In a quiet corner, Sim and Hex whispered to each other, already planning new drills. Leary stood near the balcony, watching the stars with silent resolve. They were no longer just cadets. They were beginning to become leaders. Far from the academy, in the shadow of an abandoned moon, a small ship floated in darkness. Inside, a masked figure watched a screen showing Kane's face. "He is not just a soldier," the figure said. "He's a signal, a warning." Another voice answered from behind a veil of static, then silenced the signal. Back at the academy, alarms rang again, this time real. Explosions rocked the outer wall. Drones flew in fast patterns above the field. Enemy fighters had arrived, slipping through planetary sensors. The obsidian veil had returned, stronger, faster, more precise. Kane didn't hesitate. He grabbed his gear, sprinted across the courtyard, and began shouting orders. Cadets ran to positions, defensive turrets activated. Energy shields snapped to life, but this time, it was different. Kane wasn't the only one giving commands. Tarana led a squad to the east tower. Leary took scouts around the rear flank. Sim and Hex worked side by side to shut down the enemy's signal jammers. The battle was sharp, fast, and brutal. In the end, the academy held the line. As the smoke cleared and the last drone fell, Kane stood atop the command platform. The students, tired and dirty, looked up at him. None had run. None had broken. Kane looked across the faces of those he had trained, and his voice rose clearly in the night air. "You were not ready when I arrived," he said. "Now you are. And if they come again, you will not tremble." The cadets stood, taller. The stars above them burned brighter. And somewhere in the galaxy, the enemies of Earth began to realize they had made a mistake. They woke a Deathworld, and the Deathworld was teaching.